I think today's reading from Mark is all about pride. So let's explore what pride might look like. One of my favourite movies of all time is The Castle. In it, one of the main characters, Dale Kerrigan, is a proud man. He's proud of his home that is in the flight path of a nearby airport. It's his castle. He's proud of his family, even his son Steve, who's in jail. He's especially proud of his daughter Tracy, who's trained as a hairdresser at the local TAFE. If Darryl gets a position that he's very proud of, you know where it's going. Straight to the pool room. Around the time that we're recording this, the Olympics and the Paralympics are on in Paris. I'm ashamed to admit that whenever I see an American athlete standing on top of a dais, belting out the Star-Spangled Banner, I have a range of very negative feelings. I know I should be just celebrating the achievement of the athlete, but for some reason I don't share their pride. I feel like I'm witnessing a form of arrogance. In contrast, I love to hear Indigenous Australians introduce themselves. In this area where I live, the local First Nations people will introduce themselves as proud Awabakal or proud Warramai people. And somehow when they say that, I feel like I share some of their pride. I wonder why I feel like that. In the past, I've read today's reading and thought that these verses are all about the pride or arrogance of James and John, asking for the prominent position with Jesus. However, when I've reread it this time, I noticed that Jesus just asks them if they know what they're asking for, if they are aware of all that their request entails. In my life, I've done a few things that I would consider significant achievements. Becoming a parent, renovating an old house, restoring a couple of old cars and push bikes are all things that stretch my physical, emotional, intellectual and various other aspects of my life, as well as consuming significant periods of time. In every one of these, I would have to say that when I look back at what I knew at the start and compare it with what was actually required, I realise I was naive. I didn't really have an idea about all of what was involved. I'd also add that if I did, I might not have set out on those journeys. I might have thought it was all too hard and just moved on. But on each occasion, I'm very proud of what has been achieved and very aware that each has taught me a lot about myself and also life in general. So I don't want to be too hard on James and John when they probably didn't know all of what they may have been getting themselves into when they asked to be recognised alongside Jesus. When I reread today's passage, I realise that it isn't James and John, but is the other disciples that Jesus gives a hard time. They are very annoyed at James and John for asking for recognition and places of honour. But Jesus gives them a good lecture on what it means to be a follower of his. They aren't to throw their weight around like godless leaders. They are to learn about leadership through service. Being vulnerable and seemingly down the social order is what they are being called to. Enabling others to see Jesus and follow his example is where honour is to be found. Many years ago, I heard my first U2 song, Pride in the Name of Love. I didn't study the words too closely, and so I had the impression that it was a song written about Jesus. In a way, it is, but it's actually about the life of Martin Luther King Jr. His life being the servant leader who enabled great social change in America, even though it made people uncomfortable, and ultimately it cost him his life. The pride that the actions in his life engendered are probably highlighted both by the words of U2's song and, for me, also a personal experience. U2 wrote in this song about his assassination as follows. Early morning, April 4. Shot rings out in the Memphis sky. Free at last. They took your life. They could not take your pride. In the name of love. When we were in Washington on holidays some years ago, we took a walk down the mall, that beautiful strip of green grass with all of the great museums and monuments. We diverted